indeed, that's the man. Was the water, and the other goldfish said, "What's water?" And the truth is that you don't actually, it is bad, it didn't even raise a titter from anyone, but it is actually, you don't actually see the water that we swim in. You only realise it when there's an exception, but the water we swim in in this kind of secular age of our culture, is the water of self-interest, self-expression, expressive individualism. We seek to kind of be true to ourselves, to run our own life projects, to be authentic to ourselves, and that's really important to us, and therefore we kind of push against anybody who says, do things that way, or no, don't do that, or what you're doing is not right. And that's the water we swim in. We don't kind of see that because it's so common for all of us. But what we do celebrate is when somebody does something different in that. So was it Captain Tom? Was his name Tom? Captain Tom? Yeah? Captain Tom, when he kind of decided, right, okay, I've got every reason for people to care for me and look after me. I'm getting old. I'm in a care home. But he says, no, I'm going to make a difference. And he does that amazing kind of walk. And then what happened is he drew out of us that sense of, no, it's not just about me. You know, and I don't feel that kind of lies deep below the surface in many of us. And we gave, the British people gave huge amounts of money. And we've clapped the NHS because we feel, look at the kind of selflessness of what they've done. And, I've seen those reports on the TV of NHS workers kind of doing shift after shift and feeling exhausted and feeling the kind of mental health pressures. And we kind of celebrate when somebody steps out of that culture of self. And it's interesting that actually most of the time though we swim in the water of self-expression, we swim in the water. But yet Christianity requires the surrender of individual autonomy. It's not about I get to do what I want when I want. In one sense, we surrender our autonomy. You don't surrender your autonomy to me. That's often what goes wrong in churches. You surrender your autonomy to Jesus, to God. And so therefore you say, actually, as a Christian, okay, rather than nobody's going to tell me what to do, what you say is, actually, I submit to your word. I submit to what you're going to tell us to do, Jesus. What you're going to tell us to do, Father, in your word. And so in one sense, we get this kind of cultural clash that we live out there in the water, swimming in the water. And I swim in the same water, believe me. It's not like I'm some sort of holy... No, you know this already. I'm like some kind of holy guy that swims in the kind of God-first spiritual water, and I never ever got sidetracked with my own life projects. I played golf this week and I got my best score for a long time, and I was far too happy about that. Less concerned about the kind of church of God. Believe me, I'm not. But yet we all swim in this kind of cultural water of our own life projects. And when we come to church, it's part of my job and part of those that preach and part of the Word of God to kind of reset us. So you might find this morning, it feels like I've kind of locked and loaded on some of you. I have not. I am not locking and loading on anybody. We're going to talk about kind of house improvements. I am not like, if you've done anything in your house in lockdown, most of us probably have. I did the smallest possible room to get away with it. We did our small downstairs bathroom. Some of you have done massive projects. It's not like, oh, right, I'm locking and loading on anybody who's done home improvements and saying, you sinners. That's not what it's about this morning. I've not got anybody in my crosshairs at all. What I feel is that the passage we're going to read puts us all, as it were, in the crosshairs and asks us, what's the priorities of our culture? Okay, thanks, Christopher. Everybody else, say amen. Yes, amen. I'm so ready. I'm so ready to be in those crosshairs, Father. Just shoot me down for my self-indulgence. So we're talking about rebuilding a God-first culture. But let's remind ourselves where we are in the story. But we're looking at the book of Ezra Nehemiah. Ezra Nehemiah is happened around 538 BC. There was a return to Jerusalem. What had happened is 70 years earlier, Nebuchadnezzar had taken exiles into Babylon, and he destroyed Jerusalem and pulled down the temple. And for 70 years, the Israelites lived in exile. They swam in the Babylonian waters, as it were. That was their culture. They did what Babylonians did for most of the time. We hear about the exceptions. We hear about Daniel's. We hear about, the Uncle Tom exceptions. But, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, and Esther. But most of the time, they swam in the culture waters. And then what happened is that they've been stirred up. In the first week, we heard that God stirred up, it says, stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, who was the king at that time, but also stirred up a remnant, a bunch of people, not all the people, but some of the people to go back and return to Jerusalem. And the mission on the first move, and we'll talk about the second and third moves as we move through the series, but the mission on the first move was to rebuild the temple. To rebuild the temple. So the people had kind of, as I said a couple of weeks ago, or was it last week, I can't remember, their feet followed the story. They were in this story that we're going to return and rebuild, and their feet followed the story, and their money followed the story. This incredible offering, 500 tons of gold. There's not much gold in the world, by the way. I mean, I was going to geek out on that, but I thought, no, we haven't got time. But just research how much gold there is in the world. 500 tons a lot. You know, 500 tons of gold and 2.8 tons of silver. They give that as an offering. So kind of, yeah, we're good. We're going to rebuild the temple. Yes, we're good. And they built an altar, and they started to worship, and they dug the foundations of the temple, and they're praising, and it's great. But then it all stopped. They experienced a little bit of bureaucratic kind of stoppages. You know, it was a bit like, you know, don't get me started. But, you know, we've been told you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. And I think, you know, I totally understand why we've been done that. But, like, basically, they were set into another thing. No, you can't do this because we're waiting for this letter from the governor, and we're doing all this. And so, basically, they stopped. And that process took about 6 or 7 months. But what happened is, when we pick up the story, they've been stopped for 16 years. It's almost like the kind of reset that happened when they were told, no, you can't build, we just need to get the paperwork. They stopped for a season, but they just kind of went and stopped for 16 years. So let's kind of read. So, Ezra 5, verse 1, I will pronounce this prophet's name wrong. Johnny Walford and Lena, so I see here. Johnny was correcting me yesterday. So it's now the prophet HaggaI. Is that correct? I tend to call him HaggaI. I don't know why. So that was like, Howard. If they're talking to me at school, I wouldn't be doing this for a job. Okay, HaggaI. Now HaggaI, the prophet, and Zechariah the prophet, we'll talk about him later, prophesied to the Jews in Judea and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel who was with them. Then Zerubbabel, the governor, and Joshua the high priest set to work to rebuild the house of God in Jerusalem, and the prophets that were with them supporting them. Who were the prophets? HaggaI and Zechariah. Thank you, Zerubbabel and Joshua, high priest, and whatever. So it's almost like we've got one of these hyperlinks. So if you remember, if you've been with us through the series, that the Bible's full of these hyperlinks where you think, aha, I need to read that. So the hyperlink we're going to click on today is HaggaI, and we're going to read the first chapter of Haggai. What's he talking about? And we'll read that. Okay. So Haggai chapter 1. He's prophesying into this situation where the building has stopped. Okay. So yes. Okay. Haggai, the word of the Lord came through the prophet Haggai to Zerubbabel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua the high priest. So it's the same thing when John was looking at the other side of the coin from Haggai's point of view. This is what the word of the Lord Almighty said. To these people say, the time has not yet come to rebuild the house of the Lord. Then the word of the Lord came through the prophet Haggai. Is it time for you yourselves to be living in panelled houses while this house remains a ruin? I can feel you already feeling in the crosshairs. I'm not trying to put you there, I'm just reading. Now this is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. You've planted much, but harvested little. You eat but never have enough. You drink but never have your fill. You put on clothes but are not warm. You earn wages only to put them in a purse with holes in it. This is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. Go to the mountains and bring down timber and build my house so that I may take pleasure in it and be honoured, says the Lord. You expected much, but see, it turned out little. What you brought home I blew away. Why, declares the Lord? Because of my house, which remains unruined, while each of you is busy with his own house. Therefore, because of you, the heavens have withheld their dew, and the earth its crops. I call for a drought on the fields and the mountains, the grain, the new wine, the olive oil, and everything else in the ground, everything else the ground produces, on people and livestock and all the labour of your hands. We will carry on to the good news, but this is the challenge. Father, we just pray as we read these words from the prophet HaggaI, Lord, we can feel they're way up to date. From 5 centuries before your birth, 2,500 years ago, but yet the challenges of culture, the challenges are still the same for us. And Lord, I pray that you'd deal gently with us, deal gently with me, deal gently with us this morning as you seek to reshape and refocus us. Lord, challenge us where we need to be challenged, but Lord, be gentle with us. Let your grace work as we look on this passage of why did the temple stop? And how do we get going again? So we just pray that be with us in Jesus' name. Those people said, Amen. So the first thing we see there is the first point. I even went and put points together. I've learned that in lockdown, doing them videos. I put points together. So the first point is, what's the time? It's now 11 minutes past 6. Dyslexia is a terrible thing, isn't it? 6 minutes past 11. Okay, so the first thing we see is we see a disagreement around what time it is. So verse 2, these people say the time has not yet come to rebuild the house. So that's that time. And then in verse 4, the word of the Lord came, it is time. So the people are saying, it's not time, and God's saying, it is time. And I think that's really interesting. And I was kind of thinking about, when do you ever get that kind of sense of you've got 2 time priorities? And can anyone think of an example when you get like 2 times working in you? It's been such a long time since any of us did it. When you fly. Yeah, when you fly. Jet lag, what's that? Katie's going to experience it in a few weeks. We're going to miss you. But you get jet lag. And you're physically in a new location. I must have moved too far. But you're physically in a new location. You've arrived in, where are you going? DC? You arrive in DC, but yet your body and the appetites are still in good old Cheltenham. And you feel kind of jet lag. Your body clock is your body's in DC, but your body clock's in Cheltenham. And you feel your appetites thinking, well, I'm in DC, but it's breakfast time here, and you're raiding the fridge in the middle of the night, and obviously you're an international traveller, Katie, sorry to pick on you, but you kind of know how it works, so you just stay up and reset your body clock. But it's almost like these exiles had got spiritual jet lag. They'd moved from Babylon with their kind of clock set there, and then they moved to Jerusalem, and they were in a new time zone, but their body clocks were still set back there. They were still set back in the culture back there. And so what happens is they make the move, and they kind of get started on the temple, and they do the offerings, and they put their time and the energy and money in it. But when it stops, when the work stopped, their body clocks, their spiritual body clocks, started to move them back to Babylon. Helpful? If you say no, you're cool. Okay. And what happened is in Babylon, they were all about their life projects. Babylon was it was kind of the metropolitan centre of the empire. And what you did there, you went there to get rich. It was kind of London, New York, LA. You went there to kind of get rich and make money and kind of do your own thing. Why they come to Jerusalem was to do what? Build a temple. So you have these kind of 2 conflicting cultures. And so what happened is during the exile and the stop, they forgot their purpose and they drifted back to Babylon. And I'm aware of this for me, that during the pandemic, everything stopped and we drifted back into our houses and into our own projects. I mean, it was just natural. No, I'm not having a pop. It's just what happened. And part of the strain we're feeling now is like, no, but I thought maybe there was something else. Maybe there's a spiritual component. Maybe there's something else about God and His church. And we feel the jet lag. And you can always feel that as a Christian. If you become a Christian, you kind of live in the world and you become a Christian. The world that kind of does these kind of things. And you become a Christian and it's like, and you get baptized. And then you've got to live the Christian life. And you feel like, okay, I'm living in this new location. I'm a new person. But what happens is the old habits kind of like want to pull you back. That's the Exodus story, don't it? The Egyptians want to come and take them back. And that can easily become our new normal. So we say, we're in here where the time is to build a temple, but our body clock says it's not time. Not yet. Just got some stuff to do. I'm working on some things. I've just got that to... Then, there will be a time, but it ain't now. There will be a time to rebuild the temple, but it's not now. So the first thing we have is we have this kind of time set, this time challenge. And they're stuck in this jet lag. I mean, if you're stuck in jet lag for 2 days, 2 weeks, then you're really not doing it right. These people are stuck in this spiritual jet lag for 16 years. You know, they are exhausted, uncomfortable. They don't know who they are. They've forgotten. The second thing then I want to ask you is, the first question is, what is the time? The second question is, where do you worship? Where do you worship? The word culture comes from the Latin word. I didn't do Latin. I read this in a book. I didn't go to that school where they did Latin. We really struggled to speak English in Yorkshire. You know, as I learned, I didn't know how to spell. So don't think, hey, he went and did Latin. My dad did Latin and hated it. Didn't know a word. But in the center, the root of the word culture comes from the word cultus, from worship, where you get cults. Are you part of a cult? You know, it's what you're part of. So the idea of worship and culture are tied together. Culture is always defined by what we worship. Culture is always defined by what we worship. And so we swim in this 21st century culture of self because we're worshipping ourselves. But yet, so there's a challenge around culture here. Where do you worship? The challenge in I nearly said it, HaggaI's day, is that right? Yeah. It's not so much different from our own. The word of the Lord came to the prophet Haggai. Is it time for yourself to be living in, this is their culture now, panelled houses while the house of the Lord remains a ruin? Now don't switch off. This is not like we're trying to close, we're trying to pop. I could pick out people having kitchen extensions. I can see them. You know, this is not about like, okay, Tom Hunting is an elder in the church, you know, he's a great guy. We want to close his business down because it's ungodly. Expanding your house, that's so bad. You know, anybody who's put bifold doors in and thinking, can I afford them? Oh, would it be nice to have that grey and just expand out into my patio? I mean, I'm there. You know, I want to do that. And you know, and we think, oh, is this what the passage is saying? You're not allowed to extend your house. You're not allowed to like decorate. You've got to like live in this scummy place. You're not sure where you are. I'll help you. I mean, the idea of panels is like, okay, let me tell you, like, it says there's panelled houses. What is going on here? So I found out, as you do, because I was searching for you. I found out that this idea of panels is a double click onto temple. Let me take you to 1 Kings 6, when the first temple, the one that's destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, was being built. This is what it says, 1 Kings 6:14. When Solomon, that's King Solomon, the son of David, finished building the temple, he panelled the internal temple walls with cedar boards. From the temple floor to the surface, he overlaid them with the interior wood panels. Verse 17, the cedar paneling inside the temple was carved with ornamental plants and flower blossoms. Everything was cedar, not a stone could be seen. Solomon's building this temple, and he wants the temple to reflect, I'll give you a clue, it's like plants and trees and fruit and garden. Garden of Eden. He wants that God has said, look, make this like the Garden of Eden. This is the place where heaven and earth touch down. This is a thin place where God works with people, where we encounter God. And so the panelings was about like, okay, we don't want to just have it all brick like here. We want to dress it with these pictures so that people say, this is now the temple. And what the people have been doing was actually, they'd started to put those kind of pictures, those temple-type pictures, in their houses. It was almost like the place I should be worshipping was the house of God. But actually, subtly, what I'm doing is I'm making my own house, my own life project, the place where I'm going to worship. And so, we talked about it in the spiritual jet lag, but so what they've got is that they moved to Jerusalem with this, we want to build the temple of the Lord. Zerubbabel, who's a descendant of David and Solomon, he says, I'm sure he had this in his head. One of my favourite verses in Psalm 27, King David wrote this: "One thing I ask of the Lord." Well, you can read it on your masks. "This only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord and to seek him in his temple." Now, it's not that they've fallen into kind of horrendous sin, but instead of thinking, I want to seek God in his temple, in his house, in his people, they'd started to worship in their own houses. They'd started to centre their worship around their own life projects. And it's not wrong to have a life project. If you're applying for a job, or you're thinking about kind of having a family, or you're thinking about your career, or you're thinking about where should my kids go to school, or you think it's not wrong to have those things. But when they become the centre, you've started to panel your own homes with your own icons and images of what a flourishing life looks like, instead of, we want to be the people of God's presence. I've read this quote so many times, but if you worship at the wrong temple, it's bad news. Not just because you get your hands slapped, but because ultimately it empties you out. I've used this quote before. I think it's one of the best. So 2005, graduating class, Kenyon College, Dave Foster Wallace. If you've heard me do this one again, sorry, it's just, he's talking to students who just graduated about their life plan. And he says this. You've heard it before, but it's so true. He's not a Christian, by the way. Just a novelist. So just a novelist. It'd be great if I could be a novelist. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. Let me read that again. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. And the compelling reason for choosing some sort of God or spiritual type thing to worship is that pretty much everything else will eat you alive. And he unpacks that idea. If we worship money and things, if they are where we find real meaning in life, then we'll never have enough. Never feel you have enough. Worship your body and beauty and sexual allure, and you'll always feel ugly. Worship power, and you end up feeling weak and afraid. And you need even more power over others to numb you to your own fear. Worship your intellect, being smart, you'll end up feeling stupid or fraud, always on the verge of being found out. But the insidious thing about these forms of worship is they're unconscious. They are a default settings. The water we swim in. What it's saying is that our default is to kind of think about our intellect and our body and our image and our money and all of those things, and that's a default setting. But the problem is, when you worship there, it eats you alive. It does not satisfy you. And the tragedy with David Foster Wallace was that some months after he'd given this address, this profound address about, if you worship anything else, it's just going to eat you alive, he committed suicide. And almost he was so aware of the emptiness, the reality of the emptiness, that he committed suicide. He never found the God sort of thing to worship that would really fill him up. So the third thing, and following on from that, is God says, give careful thought to your ways. David Foster Wallace highlights that actually not everything you worship is going to fill you up. Not everything you worship is going to do you good. HaggaI gives that wake-up call. HaggaI gives that wake-up call. Is it time for you to be living in your panelled houses in order to center your worship on yourself, while this house lies a ruin? And he says, this is the impact of the choice you're making. This is what the Lord Almighty says: give careful thought to your ways. You've planted much but harvested little. You eat but never have enough. You drink but never have your fill. You put on clothes but are never warm. You earn wages, only put them in a purse with holes in it. I'm really tripped down. Haggai is saying, how's that going for you? How's that life project going for you? He's asking that question, how's that life project going for you? And he's saying, if you're honest, your time, your career, your diet, your body image, your money, it doesn't get it done. Your career, you've planted much but harvested little. Your diet, you eat but never have enough, that's me. Your pleasures, you drink but never have your fill. That's some of the friends I have. Your body image, you put on clothes but you're not warm. You put on clothes but I need more clothes. And your money, you earn wages only to put them in a purse with holes in it. How's that life project going? He's asking. Are you happy? The house, your body, your bank balance. How's that going? You still believe in the lies? I popped into we had a meeting, Christopher and I had a meeting, and I found there's a flooring company just up on Montpellier. I thought, I want flooring. I want wood flooring. So I went in, talked to the chap, pretended to be reasonably posh, and he's I'm thinking, so I said to him, I am quite price sensitive. Anyway, he gave me this nice brochure, and we looked inside, and it like the cheapest, if you've got wood paneling in your house, praise God. But, I looked at it, it was like 60 pounds a square metre before you've even fit in it. I thought, no. And then Naomi was great. She said, Howard, it's not going to make us happy. Let's just put a carpet down. It's going to be okay. And I think there's this kind of promise. If I had my wood panelled floor, I'd be happy. But it's just not true. And we all feel it. And we feel like, ultimately, whatever we've tried to do, we never have enough. It's kind of never enough. Drought on the fields and the mountains, on the grain, the new wine, the olive oil, everything the hand produces, on the people, the livestock, and all the labour of your hands, it's never enough. That's if you swim in the culture of your own project, it's never enough. And HaggaI's blunt evaluation is if you centre your culture, you'll end up empty. But then he tells them the truth. He says, you've expected much, but it's just ended up little. It's been blown away. Why? Because you need to reorder your priorities, because my house, which remains a ruin, says the Lord, each of you are busy with your own house. The prophet offers an alternative priority. You can see me struggling with my dyslexia, can't you? The more I think about it, the worse I get. With a different culture, he's saying there's a God-first culture somewhere. We are getting landing soon. There's a God-first culture that you need to employ. You need to say, okay, these are all fine, these life projects are fine, but ultimately I know that they are not going to fulfill me. If I chase after money, I'm still putting it in bags with holes. If I chase after body image, I'm not going to feel secure. If I chase after food and drink and good stuff, I'm still going to feel empty. This is not going to be enough. Haggai is saying, think this. Think this. Go to the mountains. This is not obviously a practical application for us. Go to the mountains and bring down timber and build my house, that I may take pleasure in it and be honoured, says the Lord. In a God-first culture, some need to have the energy to go and haul timber. Okay, hands up who wants to turn off their books. And we've run out of box sets. Can you please tell us, what's the next good box set? Man, I've wasted time on box sets. I've watched box sets twice. So I couldn't find other ones. Man, I've done it. But okay, Howard, end of box sets. Would you like a week hauling timber in the mountains? Hands up. And you go, Howard, you've no idea. I'm so tired from this pandemic. Hauling timber? No. I think it's a great idea. Timber haulers, there must be some people called to be timber haulers in this room, in the church, watching online. Can we find the timber haulers? Great, let's make a timber hauling team, because the rest of us, man, I'm busy. Or what about, somebody's going to have to pay for the timber? But I want to plan my little hallway. What, you want to attend? Oh, I knew it. I knew this was just a preach about that. You want to... Somebody needs to pay for the timber. Good. There must be somebody who pay for the timber. Anybody? Tenth, anybody? Yeah. I put my bit in. Or somebody in the God-first culture must say, I've got to have skill to carve it. I've got to be an artist. And in one sense, you don't want me carving. But, you've got to be artists. You've got to have some people who can play the cello. School of Rock, what a film. play cello. Who's going to do that? Well, it's going to, no, not for me. I don't want to be in the panel carving rota. No, I'm no good. But okay, would you like to be on the tea baking rota for the panel carvers? No. And that's how it works. If you're going to go up to the mountains and bring down timber and build my house and take pleasure in it, it's actually got to change your priorities. I mean, Jesus put it like this: I'm done. You cannot serve both God and money. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life. This is like HaggaI. Actually, HaggaI like Jesus. Do not worry about life, what you're going to eat, what you're going to drink, about your body, what you're going to wear. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothes? For the pagans, the ones that swim in the culture of self, and unbelievers, strive after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows you need them. They ain't bad. But, say it with me, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added. The call is where we worship him. What are we going to really fill ourselves with? I think for me, I had a time in my life where I thought, I'm going to chase after fun. You didn't really want, you might not want to know me now, but I think I'm nice now. But you didn't want to know me then. Oh, man. Drinking, parties, this, that, the other. Ended up, if you know my story, New Year's Eve, blind drunk, sick, on the street, got home, got myself home, like, what am I doing? Empty or what? Empty. I thought like that prodigal son, I've got to arise and go back to my father. I've got to sit with him and feast with him and build his house. That's why I do what I do now. Let's finish. Verse 4. Let's build his house. Verse 4. Point 4. Let's build his house. HaggaI calls us to a new center, a new worship. And then verse 12 says, Then Zerubbabel and Joshua the high priest and the whole remnant of the people obeyed the voice of the Lord their God and the message of the prophet HaggaI, because the Lord their God had sent him. And the people feared the Lord. Then HaggaI, the Lord's messenger, gave this message of the Lord to the people. I'm with you. Grabbing your hands and swinging you around. I'm with you, declares the Lord. So the Lord stirred up the spirit of Zerubbabel, governor of Judah, and the spirit of Joshua the high priest, and the spirit of the whole remnant of people. And they came and resumed the work in the house of the Lord Almighty their God. Jesus says, doesn't he? It says, my sheep hear my voice. The voice of the Lord comes to the people then and says, it's time to obey and build. It's time to be stirred again. They didn't do it because kind of somebody stamping their foot and saying, come on, you useless exiles. Nobody's doing that. Suddenly God works his spirit inside them and I'm with you, and he's saying, I'm stirred up the spirit. Man, we need our spirits stirred up. Not because we must, not under compulsion, not because someone's telling us to do it, but because we're willing, because we think we love him. We want to be in this. We want to create this church, this thin space where heaven and earth overlap, where God walks with us. So much of what we talked about last week, where there's worship. We want that space. Mark Sayers, who's a preacher in Melbourne, Australia, says, there's only one response when you truly hear the voice of God. And that's to obey. And I think that the Spirit of God is calling the church in this nation, not just this company of people, and I'm delighted you're here, and some of you here back for the first time, delighted. But it's calling the church in the nation to reset and say, let's build again. Let's be different. Let's reorder our priorities. It's time to build the house of God. It's time to put God first. It's time to recenter our culture away from our life projects and center on the presence of God and be the temple of God. Randy, you can come back and I've got a couple of things that you can start with right there. The Spirit stirred up the people. Spirit stirred up the people. That's the same words that were at the start of Ezra chapter 1 when they moved. It's almost like he said, he reminded them what time it was. He reminded them what they'd come to do and where the centre of worship was. He reminded them what they'd done at first. In Revelation it says, you've forgotten your first love, do the things you did at first. Do the things you did at first. And it's almost like Haggai the prophet reminded them, let's do the things we did at first. Let's live, and I speak this to myself, let's live with the energy and the passion and the faith and the prayer and the belief in God that we did at first. Let's have this view of God's church as something noble to give our lives to, not this institution that wants to make us unrooters and take our money. Let's just let God stir us up. Stir us up, Lord. When we chose the name for God First, I nicked it off a guy, but he nicked it off this quote. It's a guy, Smith, you know this, because your church in Jersey was called God First. Now ask yourself some very plain questions. This is very straight South African talk. Does God come first in my life, or does my business hold the supreme place? Is it God first or pleasure, God first or money? What about my family and my loved ones? Do they come first, or does God now think steady on? What then are the terms of discipleship? Let me give the answer in just 2 words. God first. And I could put them on a banner in sight of every congregation in the world. God first. The thing is, this is not just like, well, it's handy because this is our name of our church, or this is like a good thing and I'm trying to give you a hard time. We believe in a Jesus who put God first, who said that I'm going to build the house. I'm going to break bread. And Jesus said this before his crucifixion. He said, zeal for your house will consume you. He was committed to building God's house. He was the true and better David, the true Zerubbabel, the true HaggaI, the prophet, stood at the people, let's build. The Jews said to him, whoa, what sign can you give us to say you've got authority to do this? And Jesus answered, destroy this temple and raise it again in 3 days. They replied, it's taken 46 years to build this temple. This is the third version, by the way, they're talking about now. The second one didn't really go very far. Taking 46 years to build this temple, you're going to raise it in 3 days. John says, but the temple he spoke about was his body after he was raised from the dead. Jesus gave his life for the church of God. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. He gave himself. This was his project. He's come to build the house. Unless the Lord builds the house, the labourers labour in vain. He's come to build the church of God. Not just to save us into our own little life projects. I get to heaven when I die, I've got the Christian label. It's called us into the kingdom. The people of the presence. To be the thin place where God meets us. So we're going to take bread and wine now. So the people that do that can do that. And as you take bread and wine, I always kind of reinterpret this, but it is about God's broken body instead of your body broken. It is about his blood poured out instead of your blood poured out. It's about forgiveness for all the wrong priorities, all the me first priorities. It's forgiveness of those, and it's saying, I live a God first life. I'm seeking first the kingdom. And if that's you this morning, this meal's for you. The declaration this morning is I'm coming and saying, God, I put you first. You loved me first and gave yourself for me, and zeal for this house consumed you, so I'm going to give myself to you. In response, I'm going to take your life in me, take your forgiveness in me, take your blood, as it were, the very life of you in me. I'm going to burn with the same passion that you burn. I'm going to worship at the place where you worship, at the centre of God's throne, I've set my clock and say, now is the time to give myself to you. Let's break bread. Let's worship together.